Hi guys, Dave here. This is Heart Space, and today we're going to be talking about the subconscious mind and how, by not paying attention to this, you're essentially allowing your reality to be created not by yourself or through your own intentions, but by programming you've probably had in there since you were a kid. And by learning how to reprogram your subconscious mind, by learning how to rewire this part of yourself, you allow yourself to have so much more control over your reality. You allow yourself to start creating it in the image you want it to reflect. You now have the ability, when you actually access your subconscious and you know how all this works and you start applying the things I'm going to give you in this video, you now have the ability to start creating reality in the way that you want, to actually start controlling your reality. If that sounds cool, keep watching, because I'm going to be going over why your subconscious mind plays a huge part in creating your reality. I'm going to be going over why your subconscious has seemingly been programmed to cause you not to succeed as of yet until you reprogram it. And I'm going to give you some of the best methods to reprogramming your subconscious so that you start creating reality again in the way that you want, because you have that ability. You know, whatever your reality looks like right now, your subconscious has played a massive role in creating that. But when you start wiring your subconscious in the ways that you want, you suddenly have this ability now to create it in the way you see fit. So before we move into how we're actually going to do this, we need to know how it's actually formed in the first place. Why is our subconscious formed in the way it is? Why does it seem that most people are walking around, running around with a subconscious that's programmed not to serve them, but actually seems to sabotage them, seems to keep most people down, seems to keep most people not living life in the way that they want? So it's very crucial to understand this, because it is through understanding this that we start learning the secrets in how to rewire our subconscious and what we can do in order to, again, create it in the way that we want, so that therefore we're creating reality in the way that we want. So the first thing to understand is so much of what's running in your subconscious right now, in your subconscious programming, was actually put there when you were a kid. You were probably at this very moment running programs that you're unaware of that were installed when you were like 5 years old or 6 years old. And this would be absolutely fine, except I'm sure for you and for most people, most of us had an upbringing that came part and parcel with beliefs like I'm not enough, or beliefs like I'm in lack, I'm not abundant. Because ultimately from the ages of 0 to 7, and we'll dive into what these mean a little bit later, but you're in what's called a theta brainwave state. And I'll explain what these brainwave states mean and their implications and how to use them to your advantage. You're in what's called theta brainwave state. Now, the cool thing about theta brainwave state is that the things you start taking in when you're in this brainwave state, it's like a sponge. It goes directly into your subconscious. When you're in theta brainwave state, things just go directly into the programming, directly into your subconscious mind. And this makes sense as a kid, because you're coming into this world, you don't know the rules to the world, and you're relying on authority figures and the influences in your life to kind of show you the ropes. But again, because of the way our planet is on a consciousness scale at the current time, and probably when you were a kid, the beliefs and the kind of showing of the ropes, the rules to the game that was given probably by your parents or authority figures, aren't ones that necessarily serve us in our highest. So you may be running around with beliefs of lack. I know, for example, I was taught many different lack beliefs. I was taught many different limiting beliefs when I was a kid. And as a kid, you don't question these because you're in that theta brainwave state. Again, you're like a sponge, just absorbing all of this information and just taking it on board without any discernment, because you haven't developed that part of yourself in order to make those decisions. And so you're walking around in this theta brainwave state. And so unless your parents and authority figures of your childhood were teaching you things about abundance and about how maybe you're a spiritual being in a human body, or you have the ability to create your reality, or that, you can be whatever you want to be, unless those have not only been conveyed through what they're saying, but how they're acting. Again, you're not absorbing just what people were saying around you. Again, try and say just affirmations and see if that changes your reality. It won't. It was through the emotions and energy you were picking up, through the actions of how your parents and authority figures were living, you were absorbing that and then putting into your subconscious mind that this is how life is. This is the rules to the game. And again, you are still running those patterns to this very day if you have not done some of the things we're going to go over or anything to change those patterns. But they're playing in the background so you don't have to think about them. Again, thinking that this is the best way for me to live in this world, and you've picked those up from ages 0 to 7. Now, again, it's really important to understand that because crucially, you're naturally in that theta brainwave state, and it's through the theta brainwave state and another state called alpha that we're going to then recreate our subconscious mind in a way that allows you to create reality how you see fit. Ultimately, it could have worked the other way around. If you had parents and authority figures that grew you up in an example of abundance and limitless possibilities, and they told you things and taught you things and demonstrated things like, oh, you can create your reality, and they were doing that. And in very rare cases this happens. You can see, for example, one of my examples I'll give is Dr. Joe Dispenza has kids, and he gives examples of them from very young ages doing crazy manifestations. Now, why is that? Because they grew up with Dr. Joe Dispenza, right? Teaching them these things, showing them these things, demonstrating these things, so they picked them up subconsciously, and then they didn't have resistance towards them, and then they were able to use them quite easily. And so that could have easily happened to any of us. It just so happens, again, that most of us grow up in a way where people are taught the mainstream beliefs of lack and limitation and all these different things. And so now what we're going to get into are what are called brainwave states. And these are different states that you go throughout the day. And depending on what state you're in, it depends on whatever state you're in, is the more access to the subconscious mind you have. Now, there are 5. We're only going to go over 4. The 5th one is gamma, but isn't really important for the context of this video. But the 4 I want you to think about are known as beta, brainwave state, alpha, theta, and delta. And I'm going to explain what each one is. Now, you already understand, because I mentioned it earlier, that when you're a child, from about 0 to 7, and it can fluctuate a few years more and all that kind of stuff. Again, sometimes even all the way to 14, you can be in this state. But theta, like I mentioned, was like a sponge. Now, theta is access to your subconscious mind. This is when the doorway to your subconscious opens up, and you're no longer in just the conscious mind, but now you're in the subconscious, and you can kind of go in there and start to program things. You can start to manipulate things. You can start to shift things, take things out, put things in. But most of us, when we get to a certain age, start moving into what's called a beta brainwave state. This is kind of like just your everyday, going through the day kind of state, unless we do something to shift this. Now, one of the things with beta that can be very dangerous is beta is also associated when you're stressed. You're in a high beta state. This is when your subconscious programming of fear starts coming up, subconscious programming of lack, and all these different things come up, and you get put into a beta brainwave state. And most people are walking around in this state, which is why they keep reinforcing these subconscious beliefs. They're playing out these beliefs in this kind of never-ending cycle. They're emotionalizing them, and they're just getting fired and wired even more, deep-rooting them into your subconscious. Then there is the alpha brainwave state, and this is when you're starting to move more into like a calm and the ability to actually shift and change things. It starts giving you more access to your inner world. And what we want to do in order to start influencing our subconscious and change our reality is to be more in the alpha brainwave state and the theta brainwave state. There's another state called delta, and this is like a really deep state. This is the kind of state that monks are able to get into with deep meditation. It's the kind of state you're actually in when you're sleeping at night. You go into a delta brainwave state, which is like a super regenerative, super like recovery-based brainwave state. This is why they say if you work out a lot, it's really important to make sure you get good sleep, because you want to be going through the delta brainwave state, which leads to faster recovery and repair and all these different things. But again, the two we want to focus on is alpha and theta. This is what's going to give us access to the subconscious mind. This is what's going to get us out of this kind of zombie sleeping awake from all of our patterns, so that we can actually become aware and start choosing our patterns consciously and to start programming what we want to be in the subconscious. Again, if you don't go and learn how to do this, you're just going to be playing those patterns forever. In the same way that if you have a computer and you program something into it, it's going to keep running that program until you remove that program or stop that program. program and replace it with something else. And so our goal with this is to not only become aware of what these programs are, why these programs were formed, but is to learn how to reprogram. Notice how it's not like just removing things necessarily. It's about reprogramming, rewiring, changing, having malleability to shift it to something else that then is going to serve you. Because one way or another, you're going to have subconscious programming. There is no getting to a point where there's just nothing going on in your subconscious. The point isn't to do that. The point is to put things in your subconscious to start to train yourself and fire and wire new programs that are going to serve you and allow you to live more of the life that you want to live. So again, one of the first ways we want to do this is to spend more of our waking hours in what's called the alpha state. Now, we're going to have strategic moments when we want to go into theta, but you're not going to be walking around in your everyday life in theta. This is like, again, deep meditation mode. It would be really hard to function in the external world in theta. This is the mode you get into, the state, brainwave state you get into when you're meditating, sometimes when you're visualizing, although you're usually in alpha when you're doing that. When you're sleeping, you're also a lot of times in that theta. So ultimately, while we're going through our day, the more we can start getting ourselves in the habit of being in alpha, the better. Because what happens is when you're in alpha, you're more calm, you're more grounded, and you're going to be able to do some of the things that I mentioned later in this video much easier because you're more grounded. You're not emotionally reacting to everything happening to you, which you will be doing if you're in beta, because again, you're in stress. You think that the most important thing now, is whatever the problem is that's going on, right? Like you're stressed about work, you're stressed about this thing, you're going crazy with this stuff. You're not able to focus on your growth. You're not able to focus on rewiring your subconscious. You're so involved with whatever's been putting you in that beta brainwave state. And you get addicted to these emotions too. Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about this, how we're addicted to the emotions of the past. We're addicted to these stress emotions, these stress hormones. And by putting ourselves in alpha and focusing on alpha instead of beta, putting ourselves in that brainwave state, it completely changes the way in which we move. Now, one way that's going to really help you do this is just to utilize your breath. And so what I recommend is whenever you feel like you're going crazy, understand you're not going to think your way out of beta. We need to change our physiology. We need to change our state. And so one thing you can do is a simple breath where you breathe in very calmly for 5 seconds in through the belly and then the chest. And again, that's just kind of how proper diaphragmatic breathing is done. But just breathe and focus on your breath and just count it down for 5 seconds. In and out. You can also do box breathing, which is similar, but you can just start with this. Breath is an amazing way to get yourself into alpha state in the moment. And you're just going to breathe in for 5 seconds. And then breathe out for 5 seconds as well. And I would even encourage you to pause the video and just do this 5 to 10 times and see how you feel. And this is always available and is such a great way, again, to train ourselves to move out of this beta stressed mode into this more calm alpha mode, which is going to help us, again, create reality much more effectively. Because again, the subconscious is playing more than your conscious, but when in those conscious moments, you can bring yourself into alpha instead of beta, again, you're gonna have way more ability to be intentional, to select the things that are gonna serve you, again, which we'll get into how to do that, why that's important in just a moment. But just to remember, to get into alpha, just calm yourself, focus on your breath. You really can think of this as also being present, the power of now, like Eckhart Tolle kind of stuff. When you're really doing that, you're more in alpha than beta. Beta is kind of, again, like the overthinking stress state. And again, you can easily see how most people are in this. This is when the subconscious programming that has to do with fear and stress and all these things you picked up lack is like going overdrive and haywire and you're sucked into it. But just by bringing your attention to your breath, bringing yourself back out of that, not trying to get rid of it, just changing your focus, you will find that you're much more calm. And if you pause the video to do 5 to 10 breaths, you may have found that you feel much more anchored into the moment. You may feel or see that colors are more vibrant. Again, just getting into that alpha state. And this is what we want to start doing throughout the day. Again, one easy way is just whenever you feel stressed, whenever you feel that you're getting into beta, to just take a moment, and it can be just for 30 seconds to a minute, to do that breathing, 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out, just for like a minute. and then to continue with your day from this new alpha state you've put yourself into. Another way you can do it is on the hour, every single hour, take 5 minutes to do this breathing. Again, 5 in and 5 out. You can do box breathing, which is similar, which is 5 in, hold for 5, 5 out, hold for 5. And these are amazing ways to anchor yourself back into the moment, into the present moment of now, which is more in that alpha brainwave state. Your brainwaves are going to start to slow down more into that alpha brainwave state. And when they start to slow down, you have more access to your subconscious. You have more access to being able to create your reality consciously. Think of it like the higher brainwave state, which is beta. It's almost like creating a barrier. It's moving so quickly you can't get into your subconscious. But as you slow these brainwave states down, the subconscious starts to open up because it's not being blocked now. You're able to get in there and actually, again, start to reprogram yourself. Now, why is it so important that we get out of this beta state, we get out of these subconscious programmings that are not really serving us, that come through when we're in that beta state? And it's simply this, it's the mirror principle. And the mirror principle, kind of just a very basic level, just says that the outer world, this outer world of manifestation and physicality and with your 5 senses, follows the inner world. Meaning, if your inner world is chaotic, if you're going through the emotions of stress all the time, if you're in beta all the time, that is going to be reflected in your outer. You're going to have more reasons to be stressed show up in your outer world because you're playing that out in the inner world. And this is why it's so important that if you're always in beta, to bring yourself back into alpha where you're more anchored and more calm, and this will start to calm the outer world. This will start to give you the grounding to make more intentional selections in what you want to include in your inner world. What beliefs, what thoughts do you want to entertain, which we'll get into in just a moment. But ultimately, that's why it's so important, this mirror principle of the outer world following the inner world. And this is a universal principle and law that will always apply. And this is why if you go and just don't really take intention and control of this, and you just go around running around in beta all the time, playing these subconscious programs that you've had since you were probably 5 years old that are not serving you, that you're going to have an insanely chaotic outer world. And if we look at most people, their outer world is insanely chaotic. And if you speak with them for just a few moments, you can probably tell that their inner world is pretty chaotic too. You don't usually get a calm inner world that then reflects a chaotic outer world. And this can happen occasionally when you kind of need to stay calm within the storm. But for the most part, if you find someone with a very calm inner world, someone who spends a lot of time in alpha, uses theta as well, which we'll get into, you'll find that their outer world is very, very calm, is very, very abundant, is very, very different because they've selected what they want to be out there and they've allowed that to play out. And so just understand that through the mirror principle, through the law of balance as well, the outer world reflects the inner, which is why it's so important to understand the brainwave state you're in, your subconscious mind, and how to rewire this, how to really calm that inner world more often, to not be sleeping awake and reacting to everything, but to be intentionally responding in the way that you want to respond to things. That is going to allow for a much more beautiful, a much more calm, a much more favorable, a much more fulfilled, both inner and outer world balance. So now let's talk about how you can start to really move out of beta through thoughts. You see, a lot of thoughts come up during the day, and they say that we have about 80,000 thoughts every single day. And then for most people, thoughts from one day, like 90% of thoughts you have from one day to the next are exactly the same. Now, is it that it needs to be the same? Not necessarily. You will have some repetition, but you can see that if most of your thoughts are going to be the same and you're having 80,000 and you're emotionalizing and hooking in to the same thoughts you've always been hooking into, to those same patterns that have been continually playing, well, of course, you're going to have this cycle where you're continually creating this chaotic reality and not creating the one that you actually want to create. So how do we start responding to the thoughts that are coming in so that it's more favorable, so that we're taking on board what we want to take in, so we're putting that into our subconscious mind, we're voting for that, versus continuing to bring in the thoughts without even realizing that are just causing this chaos, right? So you have to understand that it's how you react to a thought, not necessarily that the thought is there. To understand that you are not the thought, and the thought is not a part of you until you make the decision to make it a part of you. And just to remember that we do this through emotionalizing our thoughts. So for example, a thought comes up, I'm not worthy, and then you start getting emotional about it, and then you start creating a belief from that because you're like, well, am I not worthy? Why am I not worthy? You go on this kind of rabbit hole of like why all the reasons you're not worthy. Then all these memories come up that reinforce it more to why you're not worthy through the reticular activating system, which we'll get into in a minute as well. But ultimately, we have a choice when these thoughts come up. Now, guess what you do when thoughts come up and you're in beta? You just immediately cling on to it, emotionalize it based on the patterns that you already have. So if a thought like, I'm lack and I'll never be able to have enough money to thrive, or I'll never be able to have that dream partner, or whatever it is comes up, and you're in beta, you're in stress, you're going to start catastrophizing based on that thought. You emotionalize it, and then you reinforce the belief that you have in your subconscious that you're not enough, or that you can't do this, or whatever else it is. Why is it? Because you're in beta. Now let's take a look at that from a different perspective, and let's say a thought comes up, but you're in alpha. Maybe you even start in beta, you notice yourself getting emotionally attached and you're going in this pattern, and you go, wait a second, let me do what Dave suggested. I'm going to do just a minute of breathing, and you breathe in and out, and you get yourself into that alpha state, you're more calm. Now suddenly the thought is there, and instead of it being like attached to you at the face, it's just there. And now you have a choice. Now you have a choice with this thought from a more grounded state of being, from that alpha state. Now you have a choice on whether you want to emotionalize this thought, or you would rather it just kind of pass by and leave on its own accord. And this is when you start taking your power back. So let's say that same thought comes up. Let's say the thought of I'm in lack. And this is something, again, you've been playing your whole life because you picked it up in childhood when you were in theta and it went into your subconscious. So it's in your subconscious and this thought comes up. Again, you're having 90,000 or 90% of those 80,000 thoughts a day. They're the same from one day to the next. And so you're having this thought, and instead of emotionally getting attached to it, so you're adding that emotional, like pain or whatever it is you normally do, you just kind of come from a place of neutrality. You breathe into the moment, and the thought is there, and you go, you know what? I do not want to reinforce this thought. I do not want to give it any more attention than I need to. I do not want to water the seed of doubt and continue to grow it in my life. Because remember, what you focus on grows. Where energy goes, or where focus goes, energy flows. And so your energy requires there to be some emotionalization. So if you look at this thought now from a grounded place of neutrality, you are not feeding it. You are not watering it. You are not growing it. There is no energy for this thought to now feed off of. And so this thought now of, okay, I'm in lack, I'll never have enough, it comes in and it's just a thought now. It's something that's separate from you, and you don't feel the need to attach yourself to it, which then reinforces the belief that you may have in your subconscious. And if you're not reinforcing that belief starts to die because you're not giving it any more energy. Think of it like a seed that you're watering, and it's this huge weed of doubt you've been watering. Well, if you stop watering it, will the weed grow? No. And the water in this example is the energy you give it, the emotionalization. And so if when this thought starts to come up, you don't give it that emotion, you don't give it that water, it starts to die. Now, you may still have these thoughts come up because you might have a huge weed, right? That's still there and still has a lot of power. But it will not continue to grow, and it will in fact start to die out if you do not feed it, if you do not emotionalize these thoughts when they come up. And when you stop emotionalizing this thought, and you can think of the weed as the belief that's in your subconscious, that belief starts to die down. You're not firing and wiring that belief anymore. You've taken your focus off it through being neutral when the thoughts come up and just allowing it to pass, and therefore it starts to die out. Now here's the beauty of this little system I've just given you too. This can work the other way around. So let's say you're now getting really good at this. You've kind of uprooted some weeds, some subconscious patterns. You've been really good at getting yourself in alpha state and being neutral. And now a new thought starts to come up that just goes, you know what? I'm so abundant. And now this new thought is here. Now you can, again, come from the alpha state and start in neutrality, but wouldn't it serve you to then emotionalize this new thought that's come in? So I am abundant, and to get excited about that, to give love and appreciation and gratitude to that, which then starts to feed that seed, which then starts to feed that belief and make it stronger and stronger and move it further into your subconscious. And so in the same way that you've been doing this probably without even knowing for negative belief patterns that have just been growing in your subconscious and have probably since you were a kid, you can do this the other way around to start growing new programs, new, again, seeds. Again, they won't be weeds in this example. It's probably a beautiful fruit tree, whatever analogy you want to use, but now you're watering that. And because you have this thought and you're emotionalizing it, which means you're giving it energy, you're watering it, it begins to grow. And because you're doing that, it's growing in your subconscious. And because you're doing that, again, your thoughts are the same from one day to the next. You're going to start having more thoughts like that. You're going to continue to emotionalize those thoughts. And as you continue to emotionalize those thoughts, you're no longer focusing on the weed thoughts, which begin to die out. These ones begin to grow. And through the mirror principle, this starts to show up in your physical reality. Because now 90% of the time when you're in that subconscious, your patterns are now ones that serve you. They're now ones that say, I am, a spiritual being in a human body, if that's one you want to plant in there. It now says, I am abundant. I can do it. You have now essentially started to feed and nurture the champion within you. And you started to starve out the criticizer. So ultimately, throughout the day, which thoughts are you voting for with your energy? And which thoughts are you consciously now deciding, I want these to die out? Through neutrality. And just to start bringing neutrality to those things that show up that you no longer want to really experience that much in your life. So when the lack thoughts come up, that is coming from a programming. These are the ones you want to uproot. When a thought of not enoughness, when a thought of, whatever, like maybe it's a memory that keeps coming up, you can just be neutral towards it. Okay, so this is something you can start applying throughout your day. And the more you apply this, the easier it's going to get. The more you're going to remember to bring neutrality to these things that you no longer want to create beliefs around. And one other thing I want to mention is there's something called the Reticular Activation system, which means like the things that you start focusing on, the things you start giving energy to, essentially you will find the evidence of these things being true. And what I mean is if you have a belief that says I am abundant and you entertain that, your reticular activating system is going to find things throughout your day that supports that belief. It's going to give you evidence of that. But if you entertain the opposite, for example, you're emotionalizing the seed, the thoughts that say, I am not abundant, I am in lack, or whatever else it is, what your reticular activating system is going to do is find evidence of that. Both realities can exist. It's just whichever you decide to give energy to. Think of it like a bouncer of your mind that is only going to allow in the belief that is dominant within you, right? Unless you do something consciously to stop it one way or another. Think of that like your reticular activation system. So it's trying to get in the nightclub or wherever it is, the bar, and you have a belief of I'm not abundant. Well, then this thought of I'm abundant tries to get into the club and the bouncer won't let it in. It's not even paying attention to it. But all these supporting beliefs and thoughts that support I am not abundant just go right on through, and your bouncer kind of lets them through. It keeps your focus on them. And this is why it's so crucial to bring neutrality to these things you no longer want. Don't emotionalize them, don't feed them, don't water them, and to start giving the emotion, giving your attention, your focus. Remember, where focus goes, energy flows. To really emotionalize those things, you do want to become a part of you. So we're pretty deep into this video. I told you this would be a deep dive or like an ultimate guide on this. And just because we've gotten so far into it, I would love to hear thus far, if you could pause the video and go to the comments, like your main 1 or 2 takeaways from the video so far. I would really appreciate that. And now we'll move on to some more really juicy stuff that's going to bring this all together. So what do we do if you have something that's insanely deep-rooted that keeps coming up again and you're just having some trouble with really removing this? Well, this is where we're going to do something crucial called shadow work. And I know you've heard of shadow work, and it's actually not that complicated. It's actually very simple, but this is especially crucial to do on things that are very deep-rooted in your subconscious. I like to think of them as energetic anchors that are holding you back from rising naturally to the surface. And it's actually very simple to go out and do this stuff too. Most people are not looking at the things they need to look at. They're scared of them. They're fearful. And a lot of times when you actually do the shadow work and you release it, you go, wow, that wasn't much to be afraid of. Sometimes it takes no time at all, 10, 20 minutes to remove an amazing pattern that's been so influential in your life for years. Sometimes it takes no time to remove it, but we just have to look at it. We have to shine the light on it to de-emotionalize it, so so to speak, or to allow its emotionalization to play out. And when you start removing things through shadow work, you start creating the space for better things to come in. Now, I'm just going to give you something you can go look at that's going to help you with this a lot, because ultimately I think one of the best sources or resources on this is David Hawking's book, Letting Go. Not only does he go over why this is so important, he goes over how simple it is as well, but he also gives you a very simple technique in that book that will allow you to release things that maybe at one point in time you thought you would never be able to release. You've probably pushed into your subconscious and just pushed down and just tried to ignore because it was quite painful. But he'll go over, one, why this is not a great idea, but also how to start allowing these to leave, to start removing these. He's a very simple process in that book that's going to allow you to, again, just uproot some of these weeds that are really just plaguing your life. Again, we want to do this active kind of alpha, really bringing neutrality to the thoughts that are coming up. But we also need to go into the theta part of this as well, where we're doing things like shadow work and going right into the subconscious and removing these things that are no longer serving us. And so you can go get the book Letting Go by David Hawkins on Amazon. You can get it on Kindle. That's where I have it. And it's an amazing book if you want to dive even deeper into this. So now I want to move on to something else that, again, is kind of something you're going to do as you go throughout the day. You see, a lot of these emotions and thoughts start coming up because of certain things you're doing throughout your day, certain things that are in your environment. And one of the crucial things when wanting to shift your identity, because ultimately if you're rewiring your subconscious, you're shifting into kind of a new version of you with new beliefs and new identities, right? Like if you're someone who has subconscious belief patterns of not being abundant and you want to shift into someone that is abundant and feels abundant and comes from abundance, well, you're really transforming and shifting your identity, right? And so what you need to start doing is start being that now. And ultimately, what I want you to be aware of is to stop doing the activities that trigger these thoughts and emotions. For example, you might be someone who spent a lot of time at bars and clubs and whatever else it is, and you spent a lot of money at these things, and it only exacerbated this idea of you not being abundant, and maybe it had other belief systems that weren't great for it, just as an example. Well, if you then continue that pattern and keep engaging in that behavior, you're just, again, growing that weed that is supporting your old story and old self. You want to identify what are the things that come coupled with this new identity that I'm trying to become. Who do I need to become? And when you start just being that now, not waiting until things change until you start being it, but being it now, that's when things begin to shift. Because remember with the mirror principle that there's actually a lag time between the inner and outer world, meaning you have to shift the inner now and then the outer starts following as a byproduct of that. So if you're waiting for things to change and then go, oh, now I'll go do the things that are in alignment to that, well, it's never going to happen because the outside world is playing off of your inward world, right? And so you need to start moving as if you're that thing now. In fact, don't even move as if, just be it right now. Connect to whatever that is right now. That's why you're going to bring neutrality to these thoughts that no longer serve you, because the you that doesn't really exist in, say, lack doesn't entertain those thoughts. So you don't entertain those thoughts now. You don't wait until suddenly magically abundance comes into you and then stop entertaining those thoughts. You move into abundance physically by stopping the entertainment of those thoughts now, by doing the work we went over in this, by getting yourself into an alpha state, by breathing into the moment when these things come up, by bringing in neutrality to the things you want to remove and bring in emotionalization like excitement and gratitude and love to the things you want to wire in. And so what I want you to be very aware of is your information diet. So many of these repeating patterns and beliefs that are a part of your old story that you're trying to transcend and move beyond exist within the information you are consuming. When you're watching Netflix, when you're kind of browsing the internet, looking at drama videos, and this is a problem I had for a very long time, is I used to love watching just YouTube videos, and I would be hooking into the energy, the thoughts, the beliefs of those videos. And a lot of times they would be drama-filled or, you know, kind of contentious kind of things. And again, this was something that was playing off of an old belief system and pattern that I had. It was numbing me. It was doing all these different things. And so I don't wait to stop doing that until I've quote unquote transformed or changed. I stop doing that, and that really helps and really encourages my transformation. And so your information diet is crucial. What I would recommend is, again, not only doing some of the exercises I gave you in this, like bringing yourself into the moment, into those alpha patterns, and I'm going to give you some more stuff, especially to do with theta brainwave state in just a moment, but to also be very, very conscious of what you're consuming from an information standpoint, because these will absolutely influence your subconscious. I'm sure you've heard of things like subliminals. I'm sure you've heard that, it's called TV programming for a reason. So many people believe so many of the things they believe because in sitcoms they program these beliefs in there. Things that if you really took a step back or the news, it's another big one. If you took a step back and you looked at it, you'd be like, is this actually true? Or is this just something I've been made to believe is true because I watch this stuff? Stop watching things that don't support the person you want to be. I can tell you, do you think that incredibly successful, happy, fulfilled people are watching the news? I don't know of any. Really, I really don't. Or watching like sitcoms all the time, or watching drama videos on YouTube. That one's for me. No, they're not. They're watching videos like this. So, for example, they're watching, reading books. Like I have The Richest Man in Babylon right there. I have Kyle Cease's The Illusion of Money. They're reading things like The Power of the Subconscious Mind by Dr. Joseph Murphy, I believe. They're reading Power versus Force. If they are watching things, they're watching, again, things like this that will actually help them to start living life on their terms. And so I want you to get into the habit of really adjusting your information diet, because one of my favorite quotes is environment beats will. Meaning you could be doing all this great stuff, but then you're watching this crap that's influencing your subconscious, and no matter how much your willpower is, you will go into like an unconscious state and start, again, absorbing these things that are probably triggering patterns that you already have, that you've actively been trying to get rid of, but now you're strengthening because you're getting emotionalized that you're watching a sitcom, or you're watching the news, or you're watching a video that's emotionalizing these old patterns within you, which is, again, only making those weed subconscious seeds stronger and taking attention, again, away from the things that you're aiming to grow and you're voting for through, whether it's you want abundance or whatever it is, right? So really get into the habit of being very intentional with your information, with your information diet. Think of it like when you're watching the news and you're watching drama videos, or you're just reading kind of trash media, whatever it is. Think of it like eating donuts and a bunch of junk food and how that really affects your health, right? That is doing the same for your subconscious mind and your reality creation. If you're putting crap in through information, you're going to project crap out. And so it's the junk food and bad diet when it comes to creating your reality if you're not being very intentional with your information diet. For myself, I try and watch videos like this all the time. I have programs and courses that I'm a part of. I have mentors, but I have all these amazing information. I have my own inner work that I do. I have, practices like I gave you here. And I try and engage in those as much as I can. And when I get the urge, again, to watch something, to really bring neutrality to it and then choose something different. And so this is another big one. Just really start being more intentional with your information diet, because environment beats will. You can try and stay within certain really good programs or good beliefs while you're watching these things, but why really stack the deck not in your favor but against you? Right? These things will influence you. We are by design meant to be influenced, but choose what you get influenced by in the same way you're going to choose your thoughts, which you bring neutrality to and which you bring emotion to, and how that's going to affect your subconscious as well. Okay, so let's move on to meditation and visualization, and this is going to be massive. What we've gone over so far are kind of things you're going to do throughout the day, which is important because most people go, again, throughout the day in that beta stress kind of brainwave state, which then activates old patterns, which reinforces them, right? Like that loop. Again, you have about 80 to 100,000 thoughts a day, and 90% of them are the same from one day to the next. And for most people in beta, those thoughts coming up that they're emotionalizing and reinforcing, which is creating their reality through the mirror principle, are not favorable. So I've already given you that, how you can breathe into it, get yourself into that alpha state, do it every hour, what you can do with your thoughts and how you can respond to them. We've gone over all that and why that's important. We went over the different brainwave states, but there's also ways in which we can do this from a theta brainwave state. And this is where meditation and visualization comes in. Now, you're not going to be in these states throughout the whole day, but something my mentor says is when you go into the inner world and you kind of hit theta for the most part, or deep levels of alpha, you can think of it as like the equivalent of doing 5 to 10 times more in the outer world. And what I mean is when you do like 30 minutes of meditation, very intentional 30 minutes of meditation, it's like doing hours upon hours of outer work for how much it moves the needle. And this is because, again, the inner world is what leads the outer world. The outer world follows the inner world. Meditation and visualization is so important. So even as you're doing these things actively to really put yourself more in that alpha state throughout the day, as you're going through your day, you're going to get so much out of going right into theta, going right into your subconscious mind, and doing things that program you from that level. Again, you want to do both in tandem because you don't want to be just meditating and then as you're going throughout the day, you've forgotten everything and you're in beta. Well, that's not going to work. So you want to, again, still do the other things I went over. But when you add these things, it's like putting gasoline on the fire. When you add meditation and visualization. Now with meditation, it's something I really recommend and invite you to do every single day, just connecting to that place, getting yourself into theta. Even if you do this from a passive meditation standpoint, where your whole goal is to get into theta brainwave state and you're not visualizing, but you're just trying to connect to the moment, that is going to do a world of good in your outer world. Again, you're smoothing the inner world. You're making it more calm. You're making it more ready to create, which is then going to influence the outer world. But we can also do things called visualization. And what I want to give you here is what's called a DCA, a definite chief aim. And what you're going to do with this is ultimately you're going to give blueprints to the universe, to your subconscious mind, that will then play out in your everyday life through training your reticular activation system. You're going to notice that your thoughts are different. A lot of things are going to change when you do this. And so we have to do the same thing I mentioned when I went over thoughts. We need to make sure whatever we visualize, whatever we picture, we emotionalize. The emotion is so crucial because, again, that is the energy you are giving it. If you give it neutrality or you don't have any feelings towards it, nothing will grow, which is why we want to do that towards thoughts and other things that we actually don't want to grow in our life, right? But ultimately, if we have a picture of what we want, like think of it like a blueprint, like a 20-second scene that you want to play out in your life. And it's something you're excited about. And you continually give that to your subconscious. You start training your reticular activation system to not only provide the evidence of its possibility and that it actually already exists, but it starts moving things in the outside world so that you can bring that into your reality. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to select something that you feel very passionate about. Like maybe you want to select, you want to be insanely confident. You want to be insanely abundant. Maybe there's a certain job that you want, and you're going to choose a scene. And this scene is just going to be 15 to 20 seconds long. And when you visualize it, you're just going to repeat the scene in as much detail with as much emotion as you can possibly muster. Now, a really good tip here is to choose a celebratory scene, a high emotional scene. An example of that, for example, let's say you have a job and you want a promotion that would change everything for you. Then this scene should be you literally getting that promotion, shaking the hand of whoever's giving you the promotion, or some kind of again, celebratory event that would bring about a high emotion, right? It's got to be something that really hits you in the feels, so to speak, that, when it comes, you would just be like, yes, right? You get really excited about it. And then you're going to crystallize this scene by playing it over and over again, and you're going to do it from first person. You're going to do it from like I'm looking at you now, I'm looking at the camera, this is my first person view. I'm not doing this from I'm over my shoulder looking down at myself doing this. You're doing this from first person because what you're doing is you are convincing your brain that this is an event that's already taken place. And we can get into the esoteric part of it where that actually could be true, but ultimately you're doing this as if it's already taken place. And the reason this is so crucial is because to your brain, to your subconscious, it cannot tell the difference between the reality I'm perceiving now and a vivid visualization. So long as you've emotionalized it and it's very clear, it doesn't know the difference. And so if you continually give it an image, a 15-second scene that you've emotionalized, and you continually give it that, it's going to believe that is real. And when it believes that is real, it is going to come with the beliefs that come coupled with that. It's going to start activating your reticular activation system to see the evidence around you of this existing. It's going to start bringing you opportunities also to move in that way. It is incredibly powerful. And so what we want to do is get into that theta state so we can go directly into the subconscious and to focus in on whatever that scene is, to emotionalize it, to get excited about it and keep playing it. And when you start getting really good at this, it'll be like you'll come out of this visualization and you'll have forgotten that you were just laying on your bed or sitting on your sofa doing a visualization. When you hit that point, you know you're getting really good at this, where when you come out, the timer goes off, whatever else it is, you're like, oh, right. I was sitting on the sofa the whole time. And again, from one perspective, we can think, actually, no, you weren't, because your focus was on this scene. But when you start to do this, things are going to start to move insanely fast. If you combine this visualization technique, also doing meditation, which I just recommend you do throughout the day, just find little pockets of 5-10 minutes to do meditation. Put on some binaural beats that calibrate at theta. So if you're having some trouble getting into theta brainwave state, you can get binaural beats which help you get into that state. That's what I like to do when I do meditation. I actually have an app called Ananda. I think it costs like $3. And there's a setting where it takes you from alpha into theta. So it kind of eases you there. It's called Deep Meditation on there if you get the app. And I use this to help me get into theta. And just understand that the more time you spend in theta, the more time you start doing this DCA, the more things are going to start to move for you, the more you're going to start to reprogram that subconscious. Again, your subconscious is going to see this DCA and believe it to be reality. It's going to create that program where this is a reality, and then through the mirror principle, this is going to start to be reflected in your outer reality. Now, I recommend that you do this DCA practice in the morning and at night. Now, you can do it throughout the day. I've had a mentor say that if you really want to pour gasoline on the fire, is you do it every hour for 5 minutes. He says do it for 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes at night, and then do what's called kind of like I forget what he calls it, like a retuning or just reamplification, where you do it for 5 minutes at different intervals throughout the day. And he shared an experience where he wanted things to move even faster for something, and he did it every hour for 5 minutes. No matter what he was doing, he would stop and connect for 5 minutes to his DCA, emotionalize, then go back to what he was doing. So there's many ways you can play with this, but I would recommend doing this first thing in the morning for 15 minutes, your DCA. And the reason I'd say that is because you're actually still in theta brainwave state right when you're waking up. It takes about 30 minutes for you to adjust back to like normal waking brainwaves. And if you do this 15 minutes before bed, you're starting to go in the other direction. So you're starting to go naturally into alpha, into theta. And if you can actually do your DCA for 15 minutes and fall asleep right after, that's like the Goldilocks zone. That's the perfect zone to be in. And again, just keep doing it and trying and doing your best. But that's what I would recommend. 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes at night. You want to supercharge it. Also do it during different intervals during the day. So what's going to start happening when you do everything we went over in this video, and feel free to watch it as many times as you need to in order to fully understand it. But when you start doing that, the kind of more things during your day that we talked about, bringing more into the alpha, what you do with your thoughts, the mirror principle and all that, and you start adding in the DCA, you're going to start noticing the outer world starting to reflect what you're doing in that inner world. You're going to start noticing your reticular activating system bringing your focus to different things. One last thing I will recommend, an amazing tool, is what's called a positive confirmation journal. And what you essentially do is you write out examples of this working in your reality as it's happening. And you'll start finding that every single day you'll have multiple entries going like, wow, just more of these thoughts of abundance are coming into my head now that I started doing this. Or wow, this opportunity from left field came in as I started doing this work. Or wow, like this scene I have in my DCA, like a part of it started to manifest in my reality. You're going to start writing these things down because, again, going back to one of like the core principles of the universe, what you focus on grows. Where energy goes or where focus goes, energy flows. So by writing these things down, paying more attention to them, what are you doing? You're watering those seeds more. And so it's another great thing to do. You're literally taking it from observation, manifesting it through writing, which is only going to move the needle even more forward for you. Now, one last thing I want to mention for you, if you are ready to really shift into the person you always could become, the person that is like the 2.0 you, living life just where you are creating your reality and going even deeper into this, and you want to go beyond just watching a YouTube video, then I would invite you to take a look at my masterclass, The 5 Keys to Lasting Transformation, where we go even deeper, and I give you an opportunity to work with me in a way where you are just learning this stuff at such a deep level with a community of people. We have over 1,000 success stories of just people shifting their reality through going through this, but you can learn more about it through my masterclass, The 5 Keys to lasting transformation. And again, if you just want a little bit of information like you've gotten in this video, you're not really someone who applies things and really wants that much change in your life, then no worries. But if you're someone who really just wants to start taking control of your reality, start creating the beautiful reality you can create, go check out that masterclass. It's the first link in the description, and I hope to see you over there. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this. Remember, you are loved, and I'll see you in the next video.